Hi, welcome to The Deep Dive, where I, the creator of The Deep End, go more in depth about each of my shows. This is Season 3, Show 2. Starting off, when it came to making it, I was under a very tight deadline. As in, I had absolutely nothing before the time of the show. And if I wanted to make sure I still made it to work earlier that day, I needed to make sure I had it done pretty much that night. So I delayed myself lots of time the Sunday prior until I eventually started doing it at like 10 p.m. Somehow, though, I managed to finish it all by, I think, around 1 p.m. So, considering I had work later at 10, I wasn't fully sure if I was going to be awake enough to go. Well, turns out I did. And I did the show, and I liked how it came out. Um, which, is always nice. Although while I was making it, that night before, the power of caffeine was mixed with like genuine passion. Like when making these shows, it's always a little bit of a pain sometimes, especially like if my brain isn't focused. Because even if I know the general what I want to type, I don't always like focus on the specifics of what I'm typing. So the caffeine at least helps keep my brain active enough, but it also can sometimes make it too active where like, I'm listening to music as I'm doing it and I'm like vibing with the music and then I'm like, "Oh crud, right, the show, I have to write this." Um but in general, like especially with these stories being more personal, it makes it a lot easier to kind of like get into the flow of what I want to tell in the story, which helps it kind of become a lot longer. Because I always worried about that in like the season 2 and some of season 1 shows where I'm more focused on the outside of the story bits and I kind of leave very bland nothing stories in the middle. So now I feel like they're actually like worth listening to and I have fun making it. When it came to performing, generally I had a blast playing Renaxla. That chaotic being of him is he's very dynamic. He has his sillier side, but then he has his serious side. And it's really cool to bounce around back and forth between that. Now, I did notice some issues as I was speaking as him that sometimes I sounded like a more energetic owl, if that makes sense, or maybe a less grittier Xander. And there are times where I almost sound like I'm right in between DJ and Al. So I'm still, working on developing his voice a lot more. But generally, when I perform it, like I like to make sure I practice the lines before I actually do the show because, you only get one genuine take the live air. You can practice as much as you want, but if you don't do it in the live performance, then you might as well have not practiced it at all. So it not only helps me get familiar with speaking the lines, but it also seems to like warm up my voice. Like I've noticed a lot more with the recent shows that my Groton voice went from me sound like trying to sound deep to actually being down there. And original voices like DJs and Xanders, where I have to actually like put effort, like a lot more effort into their voice, is now coming to me a lot more naturally rather than taking away from my natural voice. Next thing, as I'm performing, which once again, it happens, I was occasionally slipping up. However, I feel like I did really good with just continuing. Like, I didn't just pause on those slip ups, and I definitely feel like I've gotten a lot better with improving a little bit. Not down to the wire improv where I just completely ignore the script, but there are times where, like, my brain will tune out and I'm, like, trying to figure out, okay, wait, what was I supposed to say next? So I just kind of keep it going with things that I feel like sound like it would be right in that time. And then the last thing with it is just I was vibing in the studio. I thought it was a pretty good lineup of songs, so I was just sitting in the studio dancing along, same biz, and then time to play the commercials or oh, got to go back into actually doing the voices. But the whole vibe of the show itself was like really energetic. Like I loved continuing doing it, which I'm not gonna say I didn't like doing some of the other shows, specifically the one I did the third one. But it's like they have completely different energies. Lastly, when it came to re-listening, I feel like I potentially fixed the audio in terms of like the weird bubble sound that some of the songs have. But I have noticed with the past three shows now that there's been this audio crackling, which I boiled it down to it's an issue with the program that I play the music off of, not the recording software or anything like that. So I'll be in contact with the manager of the studio and let him know, like, hey, there's something going on with this. Hopefully, this is fixable and not something that cannot be fixed. Because I really don't like the sound of crackly audio, especially if it boils down to, like, when I pre record something. I don't want you to know it was pre recorded because you hear the crackling. Because the mic itself is perfectly fine. Next, in general, as I was re-listening, I just loved my vocal performance. I feel like it has come such a long way since the beginning. Like, the first show, both voices sounded almost the exact same, and there wasn't really any depth behind some of the lines. So they were just kind of mostly throwaway jokes that going back and listening to now, I'm just like, why did I even bother? But now I feel like the lines are actually like feel like people speaking. And in general, I was just invested in my own storytelling. Not to like toot my own horn, but like with these stories being a lot more personal, it makes me a lot more open to actually listen to what they're about. Because even if years in the future, if I, for whatever reason, am no longer able to do anything like this ever again, I can still listen back to them and kind of use them as words of affirmation from myself. I know it's weird. Final thoughts? I feel like I took my voice acting to a new level, and I can't wait to bring out more emotion from each character other than Renaxala. Like, especially in the third show, despite it being Croton heavy, I definitely want more moments where, like, especially when you have that many characters, it can become hard to balance who's talking at what moment. So I really want to put more, like, stakes into their voice. Now, technically, Al had most of season 2 to flesh out his, but I definitely want to put more into, like, Xander's and DJ's and Croton's. Red Naxxla, I feel like he's in a perfect state at the moment, just like I said, making sure he's not too close to Al or DJ or Xander in a way, but he's definitely one of the best characters I've created and performed as. And that ends the deep dive. So if you had a question that I didn't answer or just general comments, then feel free to throw it down into the comments, and I will try to answer it as quick as I can. And with that, you have yourself a great day.